Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Valid Day 2022. It's a pleasure to have you here today. If you don't know me, my name is Olavo Vaz. I have been invalid since December 2020, and I'm in charge of the corporate finance team and the treasury. Before we begin our afternoon, I'm going to give you some housekeeping notes for this event. First, we're here live through Zoom, and everyone here has your cameras and microphones turned off. If you would like, we have simultaneous translation in our platform as well. The material to be presented is already available on our investor relations website, ri.valid.com. And after this event, it will be uh, made available with the Q&A, with transcriptions, and anything else that you might need. At the end of this event, we'll have a Q&A session. Your questions can be sent through the chat box in Zoom. Please feel free to send us your questions. Our team will take them and organize them whenever we have our session at the end of the event. So with that in mind, we will continue with this afternoon's agenda. Our event is divided in 5 sessions. First, we're going to be talking about achievements, where we will present to you some of the main milestones we reached in the last 18 months. Then we'll have the look towards the future session, where we'll be talking about what we expect for Valid in the next years. Looking at the future is a session that will continue with the business unit session, where each of the managers of the different business lines will talk about their own verticals in more detail. After that, we're going to have our closing remarks, and then we'll have our Q&A. This event should last 1.5 to 2 hours. Now, let me briefly introduce to you the speakers who will be with us. Dani, or Daniela Belisario, is our People and Culture Director. She has been with us since April last year. After that, we will hear from Elo, or Eloisa Sirota, who is in the Legal Governance and Control team, and she also joined us in April last year. We also have Renato Tisler, CFO and IR Director in the company, and he has been in our team for 1 year. On my right, we have Ivan Murias, our CEO, who is the leader for this group of executives since the third quarter of last year. And then we will have the 3 managers for the different verticals who will speak to Gay. All of the executives at Valid are with us in person, except for Ilson Bresson, who is connected online on Zoom. He is currently in Spain. But we have Salvador Cabrera, who is our leader for mobile. He's the most experienced person, not due to his age, but he's been here since 2010. Bresson is in Spain, and he leads our ID team, and he's been in the company for 2 years. And finally, we have Rafael Spampato, who is in charge of the digital teams in Valid. So he's going to be talking about that and also Valid Pay. Well, after going through our schedule and introducing our speakers, I'm going to give the floor to Daniela Belisario. Welcome, Dani, and have a great presentation. Thank you, Olavo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniela Belisario. I am the Director of People and Culture here at Valid, and it's a pleasure to be with you. We're going to be talking about some of our achievements and milestones, and I'll start off by telling a story. In December 2020, I got a call from a headhunter telling me about this opportunity at Valid, and her proposal was transformation. So that turned a light in my head, an alert light, because we often hear about these things that are different in practice. But after I got into the company, it really made sense for me. I started in March 2021. And until now, we've had a collection of milestones that speak of the transformation and how consistent it is. I'd also like to say that differently from what you would expect in an event like this, we're going to start by talking about non-financial achievements. And why do we believe that's important to begin with? Because these were very important achievements for us to reach the results we've reached so far, which will be told by Renato later. So to start us off, you can see our achievements starting with a very important element, which was our connection between our group of executives with the in a single uh, strategy that started 18 months ago and that has been reinforced with every month. We started on strategical planning. This was an effort that we made with Bain, and they really broadened our vision on the business, our market, and what are our potential growth paths. As we diagnosed our situation, we started understanding that we also needed to understand our way of operating in our organization. The company is 65 years old, and we were facing a cultural change that we would have to go through. We also diagnosed our culture, which was something that took about 2 months, understanding and talking to many stakeholders, and we understood that we had to change our culture critically. And we started basing ourselves on 6 pillars, or what we call values. They are autonomy, openness, trust, cooperation, ethics, and transparency. These are the 6 elements that guide us in our everyday work. And they are all based on a single purpose, which is empowering what each one of us can do genuinely. This purpose has a very important effect for our team and for our clients. When we give them an identification document, we're giving them power to be who they want to be. And after that effort, after diagnosing our culture, we also found the need to look for efficiency pathways, especially in our plants. We consolidated our operations in São Bernardo do Campo, our cooperation in Rio de Janeiro, in our Sorocaba site, which has been very well structured and is very prepared to receive demands from our clients. And amid all of these changes that we had been experiencing, we also absorbed a number of new executives coming into this market. We were able to develop our own teams in the company, and especially opening up new communication channels to become a single company that is fully integrated with a clear and open voice for everyone. So I'm telling you this story because I'm very proud of it, and I really believe that our future in our cultural transformation is certain. When you walk around our office, we hear people saying that they believe that they want to have a career in our company, which was something that was very different just a few months ago. Recently, in April, we started looking at our employees' net promoter score, or how many people would refer others to Valid, and we see that there has been an expressive growth in people's satisfaction, 6 percentage points. So when we saw that, what I wanted to tell you is that our transformation journey is not done yet. It's still ongoing. We've made great advances. Our agenda from now on will be based on managing people through our own leaders, making sure that they reflect our values, our behaviors, and our commitment uh, to our own clients and to our outside clients every day. And our aim is to have a better experience for our own internal teams. This is our belief. If people at home are aligned, engaged, and if they can really behave genuinely, we'll be able to have much better results from what we're presenting today. So that is our mission. Another important element is becoming a strong player for the technology community, which is so important, which enables so much of the results we want to present. So this is our agenda for developing people. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Eloisa, who is our Director of Controls and Compliance. Thank you, Dani. Good morning, everyone. So following what Dani has just mentioned, I'm here to talk about a delivery which I believe is very important, and it's something I'm very proud of leading, which is our ESG diagnosis in the company. If you're not familiar with this term or with this acronym, ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, or sustainability, as we used to say. But this goes beyond just being green or hugging a tree, as some people would say. In fact, I have three macro themes which were considered the most important for Valid in ESG. And you'll see how diverse it is and how it connects to our business. And we have some great initiatives across all of these five themes. In fact, I didn't come up with them, okay? I didn't just create them to seem cool and to have a great reputation in the market. We had a major survey that was answered anonymously by our stakeholders, employees, directors, board members, clients, suppliers, and investors as well. We asked about what was the most pertinent or the most concerning theme in ESG for our business. So let's see what they were. The first one was people management. And that means attracting, developing, and retaining employees, health and well-being, diversity, equality, and inclusion. We have a couple of examples on that. First, our cultural restructuring project that Danny just described, and another one called Luar, a partnership with an NGO near our plant in Sorocaba to train apprentices. The second macro theme is data safety and quality, which connects privacy, data safety, and product quality and safety. Valid is known for being a company that works with security and safety products. This is a theme of the moment, right, because of our new Data Protection Act. So this includes complying to different ISOs in the market and also training employees. The next macro theme is ethics and transparency, which includes compliance and customer relations. This is an important topic for me because I also handle compliance in the company and the other controls. And in fact, I have an example of creating this director's office and the compliance department as a strong point. Since 2017, we've had a whistleblower channel, which is very important and also recognized by the market. And the fourth theme is innovation and resilience, which are themes that have always been at the core of our company, and they're required for the company to evolve. They were in the past and they will be in the future. So we have a couple of products, such as our digital invoice, which replaces our paper invoices, and our recyclable card, which we'll hear about soon. Last but not least, we have energy and climate, which includes energy efficiency, climate change, and our climate strategy. So we have some examples that I just mentioned, products that will reduce our emissions, but I'd also like to mention that we have purchased energy in the free market to keep our operations ongoing until 2025. We're still establishing KPIs and goals for the short and medium term for each of these themes, and we'll follow up on them closely. I'll pass it on to Renato, our CFO. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to greet everyone here at Valid Day, and I'm going to continue what Denny and Elo had mentioned uh, about starting from non-financial achievements. At the end of the day, to come to the end of our presentation, which are the numbers and everything, at the end of the day, what we're describing here are the pillars that led to these financial achievements that we will describe. So to go into the numerical results, here you can see our EBITDA and net debt to EBITDA ratio and the company's leverage in the last 18 months and how we evolved. What's important to see here is first, when you look at EBITDA, if you were to look at the end of 2020, we had 203 million Brazilian reals for the last 12 months. When we look at that figure 1 year later, 2021 finished with the company's highest EBITDA ever, 331 million Brazilian reals. 1 quarter later, at the end of the first quarter of 2022, we reached a new record for the last 12 months, which is 373 million. And that's not even to talk about the second quarter. We can't give you a guidance, but I can tell you that in the last 3 quarters, we basically had an increase of over 100 million. So this EBITDA curve will go up, and as a consequence, our net debt to EBITDA ratio has been going down because we're managing our net debt. On the other hand, as our EBITDA goes up, this naturally will go down. So the impact of this, when you look 1 year ago, when we had our 8 debenture issuance, we had a leverage of nearly 3.6 times EBITDA. So what was the impact of that? We had a major debenture in values. It had a high cost according to our standards, CDI plus 425. And now, 1 year later, we are capturing half of that value, 250 million, through our partnership with Itaú Bank. And our leverage is at 1.5 times, much lower, which means that as a consequence, we had CDI plus 3.2, and with our demand, we finished with CDI plus 3%, which was an operation we just concluded last week. So that is the immediate result of our EBITDA achievements and how it reflected into our capital restructuring process. So I can give you a clear recent example, but besides that, we have a number of other records and achievements in the last 18 months. I'd like to focus especially on our operational efficiency, which we have been striving for tirelessly. We consolidated 3 plants in 1 year. We work every day trying to improve our operations and reduce costs. From the tax point of view, people often only look at the plants and so on, but tax planning is very important. So we're looking at city, state, and federal taxes, and even international taxes, because we are a company that has a global footprint. So every day we're also trying to find new incentives. We're trying to consolidate our taxes, and at the end we also have the consolidation of how documents are issued, which have brought major gains, and also commercial efficiency, which is very important. We often forget it, but we have constantly been trying to find the best clients, the best margins we can obtain. So when you add all of that together, that brings us to the results we presented in the previous slide. But then you might ask, okay, what are the consequences of that for us in finance, for example? At the end of the day, we are measured by our valuation, by our market value. And we can show you that through our second slide. Here we see a comparison that can be made between our share prices and other companies in small cap. It's interesting to see that the results of our company are always a little bit delayed. You know, after we finish one quarter, it takes some time to publish it. And as the market expects consistency, they took some time to understand that we would have consistency. In fact, when we had the third and fourth quarter and the first quarter of this year with consistent results, you can see how we performed versus small cap. And then we can see how we're doing in fact. Of course, you might say that our share prices are not where we want to be. And I agree, but since we have to consider macroeconomic factors, social political factors, and so on, this is our comparative basis, looking at companies that are similar to ours and how we're performing this year. And it has been very good. So this is another achievement and another piece of data that we're showing to you. We have uh, 10 big investors that represent 60% of our shares. So we still have a huge number of individual shareholders.
We then go on to the part of achievements in terms of our capital and the reflection of this. We had a highly challenging year in 2020. We reprofiled our debt, worked on the eighth issuance, and we had an additional challenge. What you see here is a portrait of March 31st of this year. When you look at this, you see a mountain that we were faced with in 2022, concentrated on the first quarter of 2022, another mountain in the year 2023, a very short term for our debt because our gross debt was during the eighth issuance and it tended to be somewhat expensive. In the fourth quarter last year, we set forth the following strategy. We said, this is not what we want. We want a capital structure that will help us to lower and lengthen the debt and reduce cost. Now, with this purpose, we had to renegotiate the bilateral debts that we had, which is what we did. We did this during the first quarter and the second, 500 to 600 million. We lengthened and reduced the cost of absolutely all of our debts in Brazil. The second graph, the second stage, takes into account these bilateral negotiations and the issuance of the ninth debenture at a lower cost, a longer period. And the great difference that you will observe here is that we're sending a volume of debts to 2026, 27, and in the year 2022, we've practically disappeared. In 2023, a lower debt, and we're lowering the curve. Now, the last movement, which is what we expect during the second semester, the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half of the year, is with our own liquidity events to try to lower this graph even further, which is what you will see in the third slide. We have multiple pieces of data here. Now, you will ask if all of this will materialize. No, but there is a good probability that they will happen. We're speaking about an increase of capital in September, which is the subscription warrant investment in new geographies that we have already referred to. Geographies that are no longer our core. With all of this materializing, we will have this new vision, and this will reflect the execution of the strategy we set forth in the fourth quarter. Finally, something of a novelty for you. We will leave the past behind and look towards the future. Let's speak about our results release. What you see here is the way in which we release our results. We have the VGS, VBS units, Telco, United States, and BDS, which is our digital unit. In the last 12 months, we have held discussions that will be mentioned by Salvador, Ivan, and others. Discussions referring to the following. When we came up with this design, we thought that VDS would represent a separate business, a separate unit that would be a standalone unit. What we have observed during the last few months is that this part of the digital is certainly not a separate business unit. It is something that is inherent to all other business units. When we speak about ID, we're speaking about digitization. When we speak about payment as well, in mobile, a great deal of digitization. This is where the market is migrating to, and we have to follow this trend. It makes no sense to consider it a separate unit. So what have we done? We're basing ourselves on VDS and breaking it up in the core units. And this is how we will begin to release our results beginning in the second quarter of the year. We will have the Valid ID unit, the Valid Pay that Rafa will refer to very shortly, mobile, presented by Salvador, and USA, which is a separate business with a focus on banking based on ID. Now, how does this appear in numbers and figures that you look for in our results? From the viewpoint of revenues, we're extremely well split. When we look at the EBITDA, of course, we have the ID and mobile units that tend to have a greater relevance. The pay unit has had significant growth, and this year it continues to grow in volume and in terms of percentage margin. And USA, that despite having a share in the revenues from the viewpoint of profitability, is much lower than the other units. And this is something we have discussed during our releases, that this is a geography that we are seeking to invest in more. Now, these are the results you will see beginning in the second quarter. Of course, some of these spreadsheets do lead to confusion, but simmer down, we will offer you the right explanations. So this is how we're going to look to our results going forward. This is how we're considering our company at present. And of course, we would like you to share this vision with us. Now, considering our achievements, I would like to give the floor to Ivan, who will speak about this migration from the past achievements with that vision towards the future. Thank you, Renato. A good afternoon. Thank you, Dani, Elo, and welcome everybody. As Renato mentioned, it has been 18 months that make us very proud of our deliveries in the human part, quality, and other areas. We also have quantifiable achievements in efficiency and management, and the results that we began to report in the third quarter of last year are based on these initiatives mentioned by Dani, Elo, and Renato. On the other hand, and beginning now, we also need to speak about our future. There is an Rolling Stone advertising campaign. We were inspired by them, and this campaign has been ongoing for 40 years. It began in the 1980s under the request of Rolling Stones that did not have the prestige that they have presently. They wanted that perception that the readers of magazines were rock stars without a cause, without money, penniless. And nobody likes rock stars that are penniless. Now, this is a advertising agency in Minneapolis. They carried out a survey and they tried to see if this perception was still alive, but they saw that it had been left in the past. What we had now were executives more concerned with their tennis game on weekends and not that those causes and rebellions of the past. Now, at Valid, we are facing a similar situation. This company is celebrating 65 years of existence, and it has reinvented itself often going through extensive circles before it became that buzzword that it is today. Now, in the questions that we receive, especially questions that come from those who look at us as observers, they think that we are a printing company, and we are. The difference is that during our IPO in 2006, that printing plant was responsible for 40% of our business. Nowadays, it represents only 3% of our business. And we have become a player who does offer a solution that is end-to-end for customers, a digital invoice up to a physical invoice, and this allows the customers to have a one-stop shop. The reality is that we develop technology, we orchestrate the technology to make our present and our future feasible. Now, Renato has mentioned that we have added the VDS vertical in the other business verticals, and this is a proof of our thinking for the coming months in this company. We are shedding light on some individual initiatives, but when we looked at the core of our business, there was more technology and the orchestration of technology in ID Pay and mobile verticals. Now, this is a result of becoming a more mature company. And we would like to hold a dialogue regarding this and regarding our future with all of you. Of course, we will not exhaust this dialogue in a single afternoon, but we invite you to take part in this exercise. Now, following that line of multiple actors, I invite Renan and Bressan and our head of business to present the verticals. And in this presentation, with a view towards the future, we will explore the meaning of what we consider to be perception and the reality of each of these verticals. This is the kickoff of a dialogue that we would like you to participate in with us. We are convinced that trust as a service in Brazil will mandatorily have to go through Valid. This is not merely a perception, it is a reality. Salvador, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ivan. Thank you for the presentation. A good afternoon to all of you. I am responsible for the mobile vertical, and I will give you a very brief explanation of what we do in that vertical. Now, based on what Ivan has just mentioned, you have all heard that the world is migrating to the digital world through smartphones and much more. Now, this migration will not happen overnight. We truly believe that this migration will be very gradual, which means that the SIM card will exist. Perhaps during the next 4 or 5 years, we will continue to use them. If we stop and look at the penetration of the technology in the market today, it's very small, 7 to 8%. And phones that have embedded these are only with these chips are those phones that are used in the first world economies in the United States and Europe, where the migration will happen more rapidly. 50 to 60% of the small phones there are smartphones. Now, if we think of the Latin American market, we have less of this embedded technology. And of course, this migration will not happen overnight. In the next slide, and aware of the digitization and migration in the market, some years ago, we began to invest in other services in Mobile Valid to move away from that perception of Valid being a SIM supplier and to become a multi-solution supplier for mobile security. We focused on 4 segments. We, of course, had to continue on the traditional segment of SIM cards. We focused on an extended segment, which is the digital one. We have another segment for OEM operators, and a fourth segment, which are the integrated OEM manufacturers. And I will explain each and every one of these. There is no chronology or a sequence here. We're jointly tackling all of this with different products to be able to attain success for the division in the short and the long term. In the traditional segment, our clients are mobile phone operators, the incumbent ones, the small ones, the virtual ones, and operators who supply technology for the Internet of Things companies. Now, the company has a footprint in 5 continents. We are 150 people disseminated in Brazil, USA, Mexico, Argentina, Spain, Denmark, South Africa, the Arab Emirates, Singapore, and China. Now, what is relevant there? We're the 5th manufacturer globally in terms of SIM cards. We have 10% of the global market share, and we have a very seasoned team of R&D enabling us to produce full-fledged products that can adapt to each of the geographies that we are present in. As part of our main customers, we have the main global companies, Telefónica, América Móvil, MTN, AT&T, among many others. Besides the other operators that exist globally, we supply our technology and product to each and every one of these continents. Now, which are the challenges? I'm sure you are aware of the fact that there is a chip shortage in the market impacting the automobile market, the electronics market, and all other industries. Ours is not different. We had a very representative impact this year. We had a reduction of chips to deliver to the customers. We were able to turn around this situation, changing our mix. We were able to purchase chips with a higher added value to service markets that require that higher added value, eliminating the problem through this strategy. We will continue on with this strategy because Silicon Valley predicts that this situation will extend to the end of the year 2023. And our strategy is to have more chip suppliers and to maintain sourcing for the top products and to also supply the smaller markets. We continue with business as usual despite this shortage. We will supply a large scale of products. We will try to sell our products at a lower price to maintain our competitiveness. And of course, we will try to increase our market share. We are faced with the challenge of the 5G implementation that is lagging behind. We have been hearing about this for 5 years. It is finally happening. We have a large deployment in the USA in which we are participating. It is beginning in Europe, Asia, and Latin America shows signs that it will. Africa will be the last region to migrate to the 5G. I would now like to speak about what I have called the extended core. For some years already, when we foresaw the digitization, we began to develop platforms. We have developed 4 main platforms to service the brick and mortar and digital world. We have a platform called OTA, Subscription Manager, and Estrado. I will explain what each of these platforms enables us to do. We can manage the content of a SIM card, for example. When we digitize, we no longer have a removable chip in the phone, and we are able to manage the subscription of that device remotely and the user does not have to go to a store to be serviced. All of this can be done remotely, and with a subscription manager, we are able to install, uninstall, or put more information in a single SIM. Now, what we intend through the platforms is to simplify the journey of our customers. When you go to a store and you buy a subscription from an operator, you have to purchase a chip, you have to register, carry out a payment to be able to have a telephone line. Through this orchestration, we would like to simplify the process so that digital onboarding and the facial recognition and documentation can be done by the customer straight from their home without the need to go to any store.
On the next slide, what I'd like to tell you about is our third product line and our focus segment, which is solutions for OEMs. And I just want to tell you what happens to a SIM card in the digital world. Like I told you, we make the physical SIM card, but in that we have a chip. And in that we have a profile that you have in the carrier and the data that they use to access the network. In the digital world, that changes. So the carrier no longer needs to use an operational system. It needs to go through a device like a wearable or a laptop, but the carrier still will need to personalize and access that chip remotely. In order to do that, we have different platforms, as I mentioned before. And let's focus on the world of manufacturers, the OEMs, which are original equipment manufacturers. And here we can talk about two main segments. We have OEMs, consumers, and that means the ones who are making products for end consumers like cell phones, wearables, laptops, tablets. And there's a different segment, which is IoT. That means telemetry, car devices, devices that will connect to the 4.0 industry, and any element that needs mobile connectivity in order to work and in order to be useful. So to access this new segment, as you can see, these are clients we were not used to dealing with. We used to deal with carriers, but now we need to access these clients, which are very diverse and are spread across the world in different geographies. So in order to do that, we created a two-channel strategy, direct and indirect. The indirect channel was accessed through a partnership with major silicon suppliers, ST, Infineon, and an Asian company called TMC, which already supply these devices to the IoT verticals, to the automotive industry, to the energy industry. They are already online. And what they're doing is integrating the operational system to resell to these companies. So they offer a usage license, which is sold or paid by the end manufacturer through an indirect channel. But clearly, in the major segments in this industry, which are phone manufacturers who need high volume, they need direct services. So we have a dedicated team that services them, offering their technology and through a licensing model. Clients like Apple, Vivo, TCL, Motorola, so big cell phone manufacturers. And the fourth point is on this slide. In order to understand what is in a SIM card or a chip, we're talking about how the technology will evolve. A SIM card will be converted into a UniSIM, and what's an integrated SIM? That is the integration of a SIM functionality in a chip called system on chip. In the silicon industry, they're trying to reduce the spaces and sizes and integrate functions from signal analysis, connectivity, wireless connectivity, and artificial intelligence, and the same thing. And now, these manufacturers are trying to integrate a SIM card into what they now call an integrated SIM. Not only do they integrate SIM, but also a secure device. So, for example, the chip that you have in your bank card, when you have a wireless payment through your phone, you're using a safe device in your phone. This function can also be integrated into a system on chip. So we're working with these manufacturers to develop these technologies, but here there is a limited number of companies that have these capabilities. Qualcomm, Intel, Google, Broadcom, MediaTek. So why would these companies want to work with us? Because this specific know-how on SIM as an integrated secure element is not in any company. Only a few companies offer these services. And now we're working to develop this kind of solution. We have some projects in Asia to develop integration technology for secure elements. And these are long or medium-term projects. They're a bit different, so they have a different business model. When it takes longer, you start working with the manufacturers from the beginning and developing the technology. And these companies are starting to develop products, but it takes 12 to 24 months to deliver a technology to the OEM manufacturers. So here we have different models. We can sell our consultancy, our development through non-recurring fees. We can also charge per device, or we can have a mixed model depending on the project. Finally, to conclude my presentation, I want to show you how we're investing in mobile today. We are currently investing 80% of our EBITDA in developing future technology, being present in platforms, SIMs, integrated SIMs, and 20% of our CapEx is in our SIM card platform, because that's how we believe we will be able to go through the digitalization process successfully. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. And now I'll pass it on to my colleague who is in Spain. Good afternoon. Hi, Salvador. Good afternoon. Thank you for that presentation. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Elo and Dani. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ilson Bressan, and I am leading the Valid ID business unit. I'd love to be there with you, but it's great to be in Spain and learn about a few technologies that can be useful in our country, and we'll see you in person in a different situation. So I'll tell you a bit about how our ID division works, and please feel free to send us your questions if you would like. We'll have a Q&A at the end of this session. So on the next slide, we'll see a little bit more about what Ivan started mentioning. He referred to the Rolling Stone campaign that made a reference to perception and reality. It's very common to hear at Vale that we often print documents only, that we are like a printer. But as the world goes digital, we will be left behind and our business will be threatened. This is what they say. But I want to show you more than our reality at Vale. What we are representing is a technology provider for safe identification. We're basically a trust powerhouse. We are used to dealing with many contracts for a long time that have a high volume and complex operations. We deal with data security, sensitive data, and we have done that very well throughout our history. We have made sure that each of these processes have been done well. When we look at our product portfolio, printing is just a small part. We capture biometric data, we validate this data, we provide technology in different areas besides document integration, and we integrate technologies, physical or digital, in our product portfolio. We heard about Estonia, which is a benchmark for digital IDs. They're the most digital country in the world. And if they're digital, Valid is also digital. We can be the third party of confidence that Brazilian society has gotten used to. So this is what I'd like to show with our products. I'd like to tell you about how our vertical works, starting with who our clients are and what we do with each of them and what products we provide. We have two environments in Valid, for the government and for the private industry. And who are our government clients? ID institutes in each state connected to the public security offices. We have what we call the DMVs, or DTRANs, which control vehicles and driver's licenses. We have federal level class boards. So for example, the board of nursing and so on. We have the federal police, which provides foreigner IDs. We have as clients the highway police, the civil police, the armed forces, the military police in many states. And this is our group of clients that we have in the government sphere. In the private sphere, we work with banks, and they are incumbent banks, private or public, and new banks. We also have a major network of authorities that use our digital certifications, and major manufacturers who use our SIM cards to identify products, HP, Apple, or Samsung. And what we do in Valid ID is identify people, track and trace them. Let's stay in the previous slide, please. So within these items, we can see a little bit about the solutions that we're presenting here. So identifying people, tracking and tracing products, and guaranteeing the integrity of registries and documents. That includes driver's licenses, IDs. We have an e-platform for contracts and registrations. We provide digital certificates with strong encryption for legal entities and for individuals. We have a traceability seal, digital or physical, using RFID and safety protocols, and we use that to cover all of our solutions and all of our clients in the government and in the private initiative who are interacting more and more, and we cross-sell for all of them. So the next slide, please. This describes our company in numbers. We are present in every state of our federation, issuing documents in each one. So we have a board in each state. And besides these issuance centers, the 83 issuance centers that we have across Brazil, we also have a real-time monitoring center in São Paulo that guides and controls all of these operations. This year, we will have more than 4 million official documents issued by Valid. We have over 1,200 employees, and we will have over 500 million in net revenue this year, which makes us absolute leaders in this market, providing safe IDs physically through polycarbonate, PVC, and safety paper, or digitally. The São Paulo Digital ID developed for the ID Institute is a great example of our process and how fluid it is. We have a mixed operation between issuing physical papers, biometry, and digital IDs. The next slide is a deeper dive into it when we talk about specific products that represent a part of our invoice. The first is our driver's license. What is the size of our market there? Brazil has around 78 million drivers, and Valid issues driver's IDs through contracts in 12 Brazilian states, representing 80% of the drivers. As I said, the DMV and the ecosystem around Valid drivers is handled by us, and contracts are usually long, 5 to 6 years. This is done through public bids. So it's based on volumes, prices, clauses, and readjustments. This is laid out clearly in each contract. And to give you an idea, when we get questions about expiration dates, at the end of last year, since we had many bids and many contracts that were renewed, we only had about 15% of the net revenue in driver's license. In personal IDs, it's even lower. In contracts that will expire by the end of 2023. So we have 24, 25, 26, and even contracts up to 2027. The next slide shows a little bit of a deep dive on how we issue personal IDs. And this is very similar to driver's license when it comes to the solutions we provide. We mentioned 12 states where we issue driver's licenses. Here we have 2 more. We also issue documents in the states of Piauí and Espírito Santo. So if we add that to our driver's license figures, we're working in 14 of these states. So in general contracts, the solutions we provide are not only issuing the document, but capturing biometry, validating biometric data, and systems that integrate between these institutes and all the agencies that need to be connected to them, follow the same contract formats here. But there's an important difference. Actually, there are some important differences that I'd like to highlight. When we look at the ID market, there are at least 3 opportunities that we can find that make them a bit different from the driver's license market. The first is that in this market, it's a bit less advanced when it comes to integration, digital documents, and standardizing document safety standards. So here we see the first opportunity of giving more technology through digital IDs. For example, we have that in São Paulo and Goiás. Out of the 9 states where we issue IDs, in 7 of them, we can still implement digital IDs. So that's the first opportunity that we have to make our technology available to the institutes so that they can make them available for citizens. We can also digitalize biometry collection and also provide biometry to all of these states who still don't provide documents digitally. There are still some states in Brazil that use paper and ink to collect biometric data. A recent example of that was the driver's license in the state of Minas Gerais, which until a very short while ago was still capturing fingerprints through paper and ink as we used to do. So there is an opportunity of expanding our product offer to these states who still need solutions. There is a third opportunity in this market, which is being a provider, a third provider for issuing IDs in these states, especially when you look at 1077, a new act that establishes some requirements like using polycarbonate in documents, which will definitely not be able to be carried out by the states. And we'll tell you on the next slide what we see as another opportunity in the ID market. In the 10977 decree, which I'm sure you heard about in the beginning of this year, and now on the last Monday, the president launched officially the first IDs issued in the first standard, in the new standard. So they are printed in safety paper and polycarbonate, and they were produced by Valid. So what does that represent? What does that mean for the market and for the impact that it will have for Valid? I think one step before that is understanding that as an industry, it's important to be proud of the movement that the federal government has done very well, establishing a new safety profile for IDs in Brazil. So we were participants in this process. We contributed from a technical standpoint, and this will give gains for citizens and will place Brazil at the same level as the best technologies in the world. But I'd like to highlight a few of the important features of a new ID. First, it will be a national standard from now on. Currently, each state does things a little bit differently. In the new ID, we have a national standard. And the CPF number will be the primary key. And we will have biographic and biometric data in a base that is interoperable, that can be validated. It will allow us to have a better quality database for Brazilian citizens for the next years, and it will ensure that we'll have a single ID for each citizen, which is different from what we do now, where each person could have up to 27 ID numbers in each of the different states.
Another very important point is that the new ID has an expiration date and will have the digital and physical options with a polycarbonate option, and the state, of course, will offer this ID to the citizens to polycarbonate version for those who do not pay. Now, when we look at the impact of this act, it will bring about a larger volume because of the expiration terms. As a maximum, the document will be valid for 10 years. And during the next 10 years, all of the adult Brazilians that are less than 60 years of age will mandatorily have to issue a new ID. So we will see a considerable increase in the volume. Of course, this represents a higher average ticket. And if we add the models, we will also have the new polycarbonate version, which has a presentation and a quality that is much better than the paper copy and will last much more. And here you can see how we're looking upon this market with the use of polycarbonate in the triennium 2022-2024. We have already delivered the first samples at the event that the government held on Monday. Now, the size of this local market will be 46 million, and once again, with the use of polycarbonate. When we look at the last 3 years, where there was a maximum term for the existence of an ID, we see that this market will end up growing to 76 million in terms of volume, half of which will be for polycarbonate and the rest in security paper. After this date in 2032, all of the IDs will necessarily have to be in polycarbonate. And after this, we will have the digital version and the polycarbonate version. So we look upon this with a great deal of optimism, and the value generation thanks to this new law is enormous, and we're optimistic that Valid will be able to absorb and capture most of this volume, because this is a field that we operate very well in, fields with high volumes that are highly complex with sensitive data. And in our present day contracts, we can roll out the new presentations of the IDs, and we can work with 10 or 12 new states that through time will have to become part of this third-party production of the IDs vis-a-vis what exists at present. So Valid will be that trusted third party for Brazil. We have been operating with significant quality in the last few years, and to become that trusted third party will be very important. When we look upon this scenario, we will be able to capture a great deal of this value in the coming years. We're not only thinking of the issue of IDs or the driver's license. We can go on to the next slide, please. We're seeking new growth opportunities as well. Very well. Now, these growth opportunities, well, in the traditional model, we basically have two ways of doing this. We can increase the product portfolio sold to the same customer as we already know the customer needs, or we can seek a higher number of customers with the production that we have at present. What we would like to make ever more transparent for all of you is that we have a great deal to offer to the Brazilian society, working with trust as a service. We are that trusted third party. During the last decades, we have delivered all of the data and we have worked very efficiently with them. In this transition of the physical to the digital world, the solutions that we have presented are perfectly in accordance with what the society needs, what the federal government needs, and private institutions need. And through the creation of some products that you can see on this slide, and we can go into greater detail depending on your questions subsequently. But these are solutions that we have put in place. Chatbot for WhatsApp, for example, solutions such as this one as well as others can enable us to extend the portfolio range for the customers. What I would like to highlight here, and I'm about to sum up my remarks as part of these new solutions that we're considering. There's one that I would like to underscore, and I will speak about this in greater detail. It offers a very promising revenue because it represents our junction of working with expertise in both public and private markets using these technologies, creating products that will lead to a different experience. It identifies parts of contracts, guarantees the integrity of the process, and will register a contract by simplifying the life of many people. I would like to give the floor to Rafa, who is our colleague at Valid, and he will explain to you in detail this solution, and we'll continue on with our Valid Day. Rafa, you have the floor. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you, Bressan. Good afternoon. I am Rafael, responsible for technology and new business at Valid. I will share with you a product that facilitates the real estate credit significantly and does it in a very digital way. I would like to show you how I purchased my own apartment 9 months ago through a very physical journey. I received the documents at home. I signed all of them. I went to a notary to show that the signature was mine. I showed the documents at a real estate agency, returned home, highly satisfied. 10 days later, the bank called and said, "You forgot some documents. We're missing 2 or 3. I returned, signed, printed, returned to the notary, returned to the registry of real estate, went back home, and I said, well, if this works, I will say, well, thank goodness, I have obtained the registry. I can now receive credit. This is a process that normally takes 48 days. Now, thinking about this, we have transformed the journey in something that is more digital. Instead of coming and going physically to all of these sites, you sit down and print a digital certificate, and this will take only 15 minutes. At that point in time, you can sign things electronically. Ensuing this, you will receive that long list of organized documents that you have to send. You tick off one by one. You make sure that all the documents have been filled in. You open up your digital certificate, and with a single click, you can sign everything. That 48-day journey becomes more expeditious and clear and is reduced to 9 days. It is better for credit, for the bank, and for the buyer. Now, this is a product that already exists in the Itaú and Bradesco banks, and the use has been ramping up. It is one of the most successful products we launched last year. Now, how did this come about in Vale? It came about in two ways. We make an investment in Valid Hub with a person that had deep knowledge of the real estate market. We added a real value, which is something we know how to do technically, the digital certificate, where we have a great deal of expertise. And finally, the relationship with customers that dates back a decade with the banks. We have always sold credit cards and we have deep knowledge of this. We were confident that technically we could do this. We knew that the customer wanted this, and that enabled us to make safer investments. Now, this is a customer in the banking sector. I would like to refer to the last of our verticals, which is Valid Pay. This is a business where we sell a physical card to customers in the banking and financial sector. I arrived here in March of last year, and a very strong perception that I had that this would come to an end. We had PIX, there was an increase in transactions, everything would become digitized. You could pay with a mobile phone and the sector was at risk. This is a perception that I myself had and that heard a lot about. Even the most digital of banks and fintechs do have that physical product. What is important for them is to use the physical card and make sure that the purchasing experience is different from the digital card. But you can also put your brand when you go to the bar to pay for something. That was important for marketing. So the physical card continued to make sense. We began to look at the figures, and between 2018, 2020, we had a growth of 40% in the number of cards issued, and we do believe this will continue to grow. There are new fintechs, new banks, and people have ever more cards. It's easier to have the second, third, fourth, fifth card compared to the past. That friction of having a new card has been reduced. Now, instead of reducing our plant and instead of removing people from the machines, what we did was to increase our production facility. We increased our capacity to service our clients and customers. And this is a sector that suffers from the chip scarcity in the market. The electronics, the automobile industry suffer from this, and we are not different. So we work strongly with our suppliers in Asia to ensure a good chip supply and to continue to service our customers. We saw growth of 3.5 in this sector. 100 million of invoicing to 350 million of invoicing last year. And we have been able to work very well with you. But don't fool yourselves. This is a plant, and we have reduced our plants from 3 to 1. This releases capital. But what is more important, when you change the purple card for the black card, the more you have your machinery in good shape, the more you can produce. Now, it's easier when you have a single place to do all of this than when you have three. We began to do this ever more better, and last year we had an increase in productivity. The number of productivity reached an increase of 20%, and this will continue to be part of our business. Well, looking towards the future, we do have innovation in products, in physical products, the technology that you use, the metal card, the translucent card, the biometric card that looks at your fingerprints. You don't have to remember your password, and the passwords are deemed to disappear. But what makes us perhaps more proud, and I would like to refer to this for 30 seconds, is a recyclable plastic card. We have an ESG that is very important for us. And this is important because we are able to aid and abet our own company in terms of ESG, but also the banks. When you are investing in a card and you transfer to your customers a card that is recyclable, part of the card is made with recyclable PVC, and we can help the supply chain, but also help the consumer and the entire financial sector. That is why we believe that the future is physical, environmental, but also digital. When we began to understand the digitization of banks in 2017, 2018, we created a technical team to help the banks in the creation of software and teams and squads that can render services to banks as well. Since 2017, we have reached a number of 150 developers in Brazil and Colombia. This is a business that grows with double digits year after year, reaching 80 million reais at present. Now, when we look at the success we have had in digitization and the EBITDA increases in other verticals, we were very confident. We thought we can work with optimization and innovation. We're going to do this on our own in-house. This was part of our perception. The reality, when you become somewhat more humble, is that we do have specific niche knowledge in some industries. This is very difficult to purchase or acquire. Now, thinking of this and with a desire of creating more success stories, such as the real estate credit, we created a corporate venture capital project, which is another means of innovation for us. And I would like to explain to you what this represents. It doesn't mean that all of our innovation will be venture capital. To decide how to work on innovations, we're going to focus on two variables. The first, how close the product is to the idea or to the scaling. And in some cases, we're still in the test and learning to see if that product could work. The second variable, how close this is to our core, if it is closer to our core or very close to our core. So we create a quadrant to look at this format. We begin with the first, what has already been scaled up and is farther away from our core. And here we have to think twice if we want to enter that business. If we do want to do it, we should cautiously assess perhaps an M&A here. Perhaps the market has more knowledge than we do in this case. The second quadrant, something that is very close to our core and has a good skill. Carrying out an M&A makes sense. We create synergies. This should work very well. The third quadrant, if this is very close to our core, and this is a product that is still under development. Our team that is very strong in technology and in developing business should be able to bring in new products and ideas and run them in-house. Now, for those ideas that are farther from our core in terms of ideas, if we can help them by giving thrust to the growth, we're going to look for entrepreneurs with a good knowledge of that niche to help that journey. What are we considering, therefore? Three sectors where we are strong and we can help whichever the entrepreneur is in this journey. Digitization in the government, the issue of IDs, driver's license, digital onboarding, anti-fraud systems, because we truly understand that market. And thirdly, artificial intelligence that will back up the other two. Now, what is it that we will deliver to the companies? We will be delivering four things: an access to a channel to the customers like the hub, mentoring of our executives that have deep knowledge of the market and that can work with these in-house projects, support in strategy, legal infrastructure, and financial areas. And fourth, perhaps less important than others, financial support in Series A and B for the development of companies.
So as important as this is, differently from what we did in the past, buying companies in T0, now we're going to have minority investments in the beginning, giving entrepreneurs freedom, supporting them in what we can help, and right in the beginning, we'll buy some shares, but a lot of options. So we really want to get options and help them develop instead of having a majority share and ruining their business. So this is our philosophy when it comes to investments. And the last example, which I can also go into details during the Q&A session, we signed and published this morning a proposal that we had for a binding proposal that we have for Vsoft, which is a technology company here in Brazil. They're based in the state of Paraíba, and they're very strong in developing ID technologies, and they're very close to our client's journey when it comes to DMVs. So we want to get deep knowledge that Pedro and Danielle, the entrepreneurs, have over 20 years of experience in DMVs and identification and help them with the technology. We're also in this journey. We understand it very well. And in developing this project with new state DMVs, new clients, so that their intelligence in Paraíba as a great company can be leveraged and grow for the rest of Brazil. Pedro and Danielle, I'm sure you're watching. We're going to have a lot of success and do a lot of great things. So this is what I had to show you when it came to innovation in payments and corporate venture capital. And for the closing remarks, I'd like to invite Ivan, who's going to talk to you for a little bit. Ivan, over to you. Thank you, Rafa. Everyone, I think throughout this afternoon, we wanted to show you that little by little, you can change people's outlook, their perception, and our own perception on our company. In the beginning, we got a lot of questions about ID contracts, the future of traditional SIM, and these questions are changing. We're little by little stepping away from that and asking more about our business transformation. And just as any part of the economy, we're also seeing that Valid is going through a transformation. And its executives, its business verticals are transforming. And we're focused on being a part of this transformation and also transforming our business as a consequence. Still, it's important to recognize the short-term journey. In the last 18 months, we were able to go from an average EBITDA of 280 million pre-pandemic to a growth of 33% to 373 million in the LTM for 2022 without the second quarter, which we're closing today and that we're very confident about. We're also aware that it's time to adjust our scopes and our focus. We need to think about the company's future growth. So an agenda that we had in operational efficiency is starting to translate into trusting the ecosystem for the government and for the private initiative. In previous years, we focused on geographic expansions to distant geographies, and our M&A was based on excessive FOMO. Now we want to adjust our core. Through technology and transformation, we want to move to any eventual M&As that might appear. In the last months, we've also had a DCM-oriented agenda, and now we want to have more discussions on where the company's capital will be in the future. So with that, we'd also like to give you an update to our one-page initiatives that we showed a year ago. First, because we've reached some of them, like maximizing core returns. Of course, this is never a game that you win. You can never lower your guard. There's a lot to do, but I think we did a great job over the last months. Increasing digital scale and building the mobile transition is an exercise that will never finish, as you saw in Rafa and Bressan's presentation. You know how focused we are on making that happen. And finally, the more human side of being an agile company, a simpler company, is also an ongoing effort. So updating the company's vision, the first element that we'd like to remove is that we are no longer facilitators in a journey, but we want to be recognized by our clients as a true trust powerhouse. And how does that unfold into the 5 goals? Well, 4 and 5 are actually a continuous effort to strengthen our team and our culture. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are a permanent search for new efficiencies, for new theories, but with a lower dedication from this team. We also have M2 and 8 and 3, which are trained to continue any theories like fiscal, it was mentioned before, which will still be on our radar. And with the time we have at the end, we need to focus. The dedication in creating new growth avenues for the company. And finally, we're stepping away from DCM. Olavo and Renato were dedicated to that, but now we will be looking at future investment alternatives. And at the end, there's something that is a little bit subliminal that I'd like to highlight. We're very proud of having a diverse, multi-protagonist organization that has the feeling of ownership across all departments, all business verticals, and all of our geographies. This year, as I said, we're celebrating our 65th anniversary, and although we're very proud of our history, we're even more excited about building the next 65. We're leveraging a DNA of adaptation. This company has always known how to reinvent itself. So besides thanking you for being here, Renato and I and our entire team are available to answer your questions and anything else you might want to say. Olavo, over to you. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, everyone. Well, as I said in the beginning, your questions can be sent over Zoom. So you can send us your questions using Zoom. We're compiling them, and we will start answering them soon. Just give us a couple of minutes to get organized, and we'll be right back. We're back, and we're going to start with our Q&A session. The first question will be asked to Bressan and Rafa. Let's see if Bressan is connected. If not, wait, maybe that was him. Okay, Bressan, the question that we got from Fabio is, Valid has announced a very interesting acquisition, but you do not inform the value. Can you tell us the investment value? That's it. I'll ask the other one to Renato later. So can you tell us what was the value and tell us a bit more about this acquisition or transaction with Vsoft? All right, the question was asked by Fabio. Okay, good afternoon, Fabio. First, to tell you about the price or the values, we cannot tell you that because of our contract. And there's still some ongoing due diligence. So we are taking a minority stake, as Rafa told us. At D0, we are coming in with a small participation. And when we conclude our diligence, we'll be able to tell you what is our stake. But this is not as relevant right now. I think the most important thing is how Vsoft can help us to add to our product portfolio, expanding solutions within the same client. So Vsoft clearly has a good solution. A good part of their current revenue is in training drivers. So they issue documents and they also capture biometry, validate it, and issue documents. And Vsoft is in a previous step in that chain. So training drivers with their technology and issuing documents with the technology that we provide to the DMVs is one of the most important lines to increase revenue for Vsoft and Valid. Another important line is issuing ID documents. Vsoft is present in 5 Brazilian states. They have biometry collection technology in 5 states where we're not. So collecting biometry, validating, or employing a process that leads to the issuance of a document. They don't issue it themselves. And they also operate as a biometry enabler, which is something that institutes will need more and more in the future. So I think this other front, being the biometry engine and collecting biometry, will help us be even more present there. As you might recall, we're in 9 states, and with Vsoft, we will be in a total of 14. So it will retrofeed our product portfolio and will add more technology to our portfolio. And this will only develop further with our stake in Vsoft. Of course, we had a study, and we'll tell you about that as soon as all the due diligence process is concluded. And Rafa, if you'd like to add anything, please feel free to do so. Yeah, I'll say something in the next question. Okay, the next question from Fabio, and I'm asking this to you, is what your forecast is for the second quarter for financial results. Well, Fabio, as always, we can't provide any guidance about the second quarter. So unfortunately, I can't tell you what our forecast is, but I can tell you that the second quarter will continue to be strong. Our mobile department has been doing very well in the second quarter, despite what Salvador mentioned about a chip shortage. We've had good volumes for the second quarter, and we had good volumes for the first quarter, and we're trying to keep them in the second quarter. So chip volumes might be what differentiates the second quarter from the first, but we're still very optimistic about our business opportunities for the second quarter. Thank you, Renato. Now we have a question from Juliano, and I think this will go for Elo and Rafa. He's asking about governance in your stake in the companies you invested in. Thank you, Juliano. I'll connect this to another question we got from Isabel, if you can read that. Yes, Isabel also asked about the acquisition of Vsoft, if it's a majority or minority stake. Great. So what are our goals? We want to expand the number of products we have in our clients and our current clients, and I'll tell you a bit more about what that means. Vsoft has a solution that ensures that driver students go to class. There's an important issue of fraud there. There's a regulation that says that driver schools need to make sure that people are actually going to class. So they have a camera in the beginning and the end of the class, and it takes sequential photos to make sure that that person is there during class. And we want to expand that to different states. So it's a product that, it's an additional product in a client that we already have. And the second expectation is that our ID product in driver's license and IDs will become more complete, more comprehensive. So they'll help in facial identification, creating an even stronger product than what we have currently. So these are the two main goals we have. It was an acquisition of 10%, and we're also getting options for the future. So it's more about the options and less about the stake, as I said in the beginning. And finally, our governance in our minority stake companies, well, company because we only have one, again, gives a lot of freedom to our entrepreneurs and supports them so that they grow. Of course, we'll have a monthly follow-up to make sure that these products get the synergies that we can provide, and we also want to make sure that these products are more integrated to our own. So with every month, we'll be looking at that carefully to make sure that all the promises we made to our entrepreneurs are carried out, and so that we can optimize all the opportunities they can have for us. Great. Another question from Juliano is about the mobile area. Valid has its own technology that stands out from the market. Do you have any competitive advantage with other competitors? Are OEMs verticalizing production? Thank you for that question, Juliano. So about technology, what I can tell you about all technology that we have, eSIM, SIM cards are our own technology. So when it comes to that, we're talking about, well, probably not for integrated SIM, but for all other platforms, we have very standardized markets. So that ensures that there's interoperability between the different cell phone operations worldwide. So to say if we have any competitive edge, more than the technology, depending on the vertical, we have specific competitive edges. So for example, in SIM cards, what makes us stand out is our service, our cost structure, our outsourced production, some product development technologies. This is what makes us stand out from other SIM providers. When we look at OEMs, what makes us stand out is the platform that allows us to manage the chips. They're standardized, but we can provide additional services, integrating payment platform, having digital onboarding, BQIC. These are the factors that we can have for OEMs. And in OEMs, also being at the right moment to implement technology. So for example, in a phone manufacturer, that's essential because the potential change of supplier is becoming more complex. It's much greater than it was in the past. So being in the project with clients from the beginning makes a huge difference. So I'd say that those are the factors that make us stand out today. And the third question was about OEMs, right? Of course, OEMs always want to add more autonomy layers, but it's a totally heterogeneous world. We have big OEMs, smaller OEMs. So if you look at Apple, for example, of course they are vertical. They're developing their own chips, their own processors. Uh, with Intel and Qualcomm, the same goes. So of course, Apple has a vertical process and they're integrating everything. They're integrating the eSIM. But that's not how it goes for the entire world. We have other OEMs that don't have that capability and that will continue to require SIMs, eSIMs, and in the case of integrated SIMs, there are um, challenges. And in developing these technologies, we need to work with them so that they can develop these technologies like Qualcomm and Unisoft. So we're working with them to develop it from the beginning.
I don't know if I have answered the question fully, but that is it. Well, thank you, Salvador. Another question for Bressan. In the perception of Valid, which are the barriers in terms of moving ahead in terms of the digitization of documents? Well, we have a bottleneck initially working with ID cards for states that have a great deal of competition or that are issuing the documents in a very primary way. They base themselves on the inputs and then they work with the issuance. And we don't think it will continue to work like this. The agency itself will perhaps make the decision to outsource this work and carry out the assessment of where it would be better to produce these IDs. When it comes to the issuance of driver's license, well, there are some large states that do this. Our contracts, of course, will be over soon, and we will have the opportunity of obtaining this job in the coming bids. Now, what we have underway in some of the states, as for example, Espírito Santo or Piauí, we already have contracts with Valid, and we have the contract to carry out the digitization of their archives, which means that we would be included in other stages of the issue of documents. There was a bid in Rio Grande do Sul, and we are presently working with the digitization of the entry of documents coming from citizens, and we have eased the entire process of the registry for the entire chain. Therefore, these are some of the difficulties and perhaps the potential that we have lying ahead. Bressan, I would like to speak about IDs. We have received a question from Guilherme if Valid can progress with the issue of IDs in other countries, new countries. We are not debating this topic in depth presently, of course. That possibility of disputing the market abroad brings about other challenges, and presently we're more concerned with offering full coverage in the domestic market. And we are present in 80% of the issue of driver's licenses in Brazil. And this means that we could have a further geographical expansion because of this. There are many markets where we are not present, but the process of issuing documents is a process that Valid has great knowledge on. And of course, this is a topic that we will challenge ourselves with. But presently, I cannot say that we are planning anything in this direction. If we one day decide to do this, we will communicate you about this, and it will be a decision based on our ability to enhance this process, which is already very mature in Brazil. We could take it to other geographies, but presently we're not thinking about this. We do have integrations, enhancements, and challenges for Valid. Perhaps we need to complement our technology, enabling us to be ever more capable to truly create a highly competitive portfolio. The Brazilian market is enormous. We still have to explore it fully, although we do acknowledge our capacity that we have a very mature process and very mature products at Valid. Thank you, Bressan. Now, let's move on to the pay vertical. And I will begin with Ivan. And if anybody would like to add anything, you're welcome. We have two questions of Giuliani and Guilherme. The substitution of Mauricio that we recently announced, and if there has been a drop in the issue of credit cards because of the worsening of the economy. Now, Mauricio is an executive that we truly respect and admire. We have, many of the presentations that we have were thanks to the work of Mauricio. We're now reaping that success. We have hired an executive in the market. This executive is on her last day at her previous job, and later today we will release her name to the market. We carried out our search for the executive based on two important pillars and a third pillar that came about. Firstly, a deep knowledge of the banking market and credit cards more specifically, the possibility of a cultural alignment based on the values that were mentioned today by Elo and Danny. She is going to be part of a team through what we imagine will be a plug and play process. And the third pillar, which was a byproduct, we will complete our executive team with another woman. It will be a pleasure to welcome this executive, and we will release this information to the market tomorrow. Now, although we have perceived a positive evolution in terms of the bank cards, beginning in the first quarter, we did observe an increase in the CAC of the banks because of the increase in Selic. Now, Selic is a production input, and as the CAC increases, they are less aggressive in terms of the opening of accounts. There is the credit risk consideration. But of course, we continue to run our plan 24/7 at full production capacity. And we will be very observant, and it is a short-term concern for us. Thank you, Ivan. Renato, a question from Enrique referring to our liquidity schedule. In the liquidity schedule, after positive liquidity events, excluding the subscription warrant, we have 40 million in gross debt. Would this come from the operation in the USA, and which will be your other liquidity events, to so call them? Well, in truth, we don't split these two when working with this account. We don't take out the subscription warrant. We base ourselves on the full amount, the initiatives that we have underway, the subscription warrant, the USA, and other minor events that still are very relevant, and we work based on the probability that they will materialize. Now, based on that probability, we say that part of this money should be coming in, and when it comes in, it will have this impact on our capital structure. Now, this is the way that we work with this. We don't say that it is 0, 1 in things that are completely outside of our control. The issue of the subscription warrant is not something that is fully guaranteed. Now, based on the results that we have had, it seems to be working. In the release of the first quarter, it went beyond what we had foreseen. But we do have political and macroeconomic issues that not only have an impact on our company, but on all of the listed companies. And so this is deemed to be a probability. Simply to add something, we have cash generation and a very strong EBITDA. This is a liquidity event for the company. We have several similar questions. Some questions, Ivan, referring to the main risks and challenges for Valid in the medium and long term. In the short term, Renato mentioned this. When we look at the business dynamic, perhaps what is more problematic is the issue of chips that we're following up on with Salvador and others. For the long term, many of the themes that we mentioned here, the generation of IDs, how this will be transformed, and what other parts of the ID process that we can bring in-house in terms of the mobile part, the transformation of the business. Salvador mentioned the 4 main pillars regarding this. We have the traditional SIM card, and in the other 3 pillars, there are concerns that we have in terms of the future of this market. The CapEx allocation that is geared towards building this future. Of course, we look at the banking market, and when our ambition is to be the best powerhouse for our clients, we see an improvement in leverage and a true scarcity of private capital. A short time ago, the situation was completely different. So we look at other companies, other stories, those that are closer to our core, and we try to think of another avenue towards the future. This is what we have been working with in-house jointly with our team. Thank you, Ivan. A very simple question from Bruno, referring to the percentage of our printing company. In 2008, it was 40%, which is our metric for this percentage. Now, Alexandre asks us how you can expand the expansion of the hub to other businesses. Who asked the question? Alexandre. Well, Alexandre, this is part of our philosophy, how we help new entrepreneurs as we did in Vsoft. We see what we have at Valid that we can put at the disposal of the entrepreneur. This is the main route, and things that emanate from our core. Well, you can't help that many people. That's too difficult. We have to help to sustain and give freedom to the entrepreneur to create new businesses. Regarding the hub, well, there are many things that we can expand from based on the hub itself, the purchase of vehicles. We're investing more capital. We're using our own team of technology to help with that technology in the hub. Now, this is how we look upon this. And new businesses with the same philosophy, businesses that will work, and to invest in our technology team to help Antonio create ever stronger business. Well, thank you. Ivan has already referred to this. The question has come up again. Another Alexandre asks, what is happening with the smart city topic? Can this grow as part of the company revenues? Very good question. Well, as part of our learning and the evolution of thinking that we have had in the last 18 months, we think about these topics. Blue Pay, Grotto, the digital positioning and smart cities and the stance they had in the past. We have been shedding a very specific light on these investments because we had very important things that were more linked to our core. They refer to a technological integration. And in that vision that Renato presented of ID Pay and mobile, were integrated that issue of smart cities and ID. The revenue percentage is quite minor, but it does make sense because in the municipalities where we work, it is important to identify the relationship with the municipality, and we do that. And we work with entrepreneurs that we respect, and we assess the possibility of go-to-market for these initiatives. We have selected two, Go-to-Pay and Growtopus, smart cities through Mitra, and we're looking at the part of go-to-market with extreme caution. When these initiatives do not receive the go-ahead in terms of investment, we have an RDO that is put in place every quarter to assess the growth forecast of each process, our relationship with investments, and the investment outlook. When the go-to-market, for some reason, shows us that the future vision is not very clear, we come to a halt. This is the diligent work that we carry out with the work of investors. So these two initiatives presently are on hold, and the Valid Hub would be the fifth initiative, and it has had the go-ahead to grow at a faster pace. Bressan, a question for you from Bruno and Isabel. They want to know more about the new national ID, how many you will be producing this year, how many have already been produced, and if the digital ID solution will help you in terms of the document issue or issuance, excuse me. Well, Bruno and Maria Isabel, thank you for the question. I'm going to split my answer. First, speaking in terms of the issuance volume this year. Now, all of the states as a mandatory process because of law 10,977 will only begin in March of 2023. The federal government has set up an executive chamber that is specialized and is tackling how to roll out this process in each of the states. Initially, 8 states have been set aside as becoming pilots for this process. There's a long list of technical specifications, and we are working with a new product that is polycarbonate, which is also a security process. We need to begin a very careful rollout, and the industries are being called upon to work with a schedule to guarantee that this process will truly be operational. In those 8 states, we have 4 where Valid is already in operation: Rio Grande do Sul, the Federal District, Minas Gerais, and Goiás. And we're meeting with the Paraná Institute team to also receive support. So the number of new documents issued at present continues to be quite small. They were part of a pilot program in the federal government, but We are going to be working with Rio Grande do Sul, Minas Gerais, and other states, and we do have a plan to begin. Everything will begin as of the month of August. We have the Minas Gerais Institute of Identification that will first of all have to work with a complete rollout to issue the new ID for that state. They're going to issue the entire volume, and this represents 500,000 new IDs that will be issued during the second semester.
But from March next year, all institutes need to be integrated, and the total volume issued will be in the new model, and it will be that growth estimate for polycarbonate and the safety paper I mentioned during my presentation. The other question was about how much the digital ID issuance will add to the document. Well, it will add a lot of technology in the group of solutions that we'll present to the states. As established by the 10977 decree, we have two providers for digital IDs. One version will be used for the gov.br app, which will be available. And each institute can have its own app, like the digital ID in Sao Paulo, which can have some additional functions. For example, issuing a second copy, a real-time proof of life that you might need to be required to issue that second copy, paying a fee, making the process more simple. If you don't need to collect biometry data once again. So it's very important. And it helps to sustain the entire operation we have as we offer for each institute the possibility of developing and ensuring the right functioning of this structure. In terms of cost, it will be very difficult to separate that and price it, but it will be an additional attribute in our contract with each institute, following what was in the bid, which is a fixed price per capture or issuance, including physical and digital formats. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Thank you, Brisson. Renato, we have some questions about margin. So Christian and Carlos have asked about it. So how do you foresee your EBITDA margin will expand to a more sustainable level? And with these measures, what benefits have we had and what can we have in the future? Well, to answer the last part of the question, starting with the easy piece, when we look at our current margins across all businesses, as a percentage, we're going up. So nearly all of the achievements that we described here are being translated into margins. When we look at what Rafa mentioned, the operational part, the plants, when we look at the tax side of it, especially in cards, when we look at management or managing a portfolio, Salvador has been working with telecom companies, and all of it is reflected in our margins. Like I say, it is being reflected because not all of it is reflected yet. There are many things that we're still doing that will still show results in the future, but many of them are there already. All you need to do is to look at the evolution of our percentages and our margins. Looking towards the future, again, I can't give you a guidance on what our percentages or what our margins will be in the future, but it's like we've been saying, when it comes to operational efficiency, we have been striving for that tirelessly. Besides these initiatives, what I'd like to tell you is that, of course, we're focused on our margins, but besides that, there's another thing that we've looked at, which is our margin conversions into cash. When we look at that, we're of course analyzing ROIC, how you can take your working capital and reduce it to transform more of the operational results into cash. So we've focused a lot on that, and that goes into the financial side, lowering the cost of debt. It also helps keep more cash at the end of the day. CapEx control, as we've said, and some other opportunities. Now we have a CapEx committee. We approve everything above 500,000. Everything that needs to be approved above 500,000 needs to go through that CapEx committee. So not only are we looking at our margins constantly, but we're also keeping an eye on everything that doesn't appear in our margins, but that represent cash at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is cash, how much you have left over, so that you can pay your debt or pay dividends or make new investments, which is what we want to do instead of paying dividends. We're always thinking about how we can invest in initiatives or outside partnerships so that we can continue to have sustainable growth. So we've focused on that. And of course, it's not as clear because it's not measurable in a margin, but it's something that we're deeply involved with. Thank you, Renato. There are two questions here about onboarding private market. How do you see yourself working? How do we see ourselves there comparing to Unicom or ID Wall? So two similar questions. Okay. So what we learned from the market is that there are two things we need on this journey. First, authentication, making sure that that person is who they claim they are. And secondly, how you onboard them. When you think about Valid Hub, it's an onboarding business, right? It onboards someone for real estate credit, for example. We have two main lessons here. First, checking the person seems to have a lower value, a lower financial value that has a lower margin. What adds value is having a solution for the entire journey. So with real estate credit, our average ticket is 50 times higher than just ID verification, but you need to have specific information about that market. So we started working differently here. We started looking at specific journeys where technology does not necessarily drive who wins. It's more about knowing the business. So ID Wall is a great example. In ID Wall, they started as a bank with a digital journey, and since they had a lot of information there, they wanted to expand that product to other banks. So they have a successful business, they have challenges, but it's successful. So it's about building a journey, specific journeys, and this is the example of Valid Hub, which we will try to get more information from the market than just having data and hopefully that makes more sense. Thank you, Rafa. So we're coming to the last few questions, and for the sake of time, we will put on our screen a QR code. So if you'd like to continue and on an individual session with our executives, you can join us. But let's take a couple of questions before we finish. First, for Renato, if we can go into detail how dividends would be paid at, how dividends will be paid out in 2022. Well, the first point is that at the end of the year, we need to have net income, of course, in accounting, because in operations, we're doing very well. But to have significant accounting income, there's an issue of, for example, foreign exchange. The Brazilian real has valued in the first quarter versus the second quarter, and that led to a loss due to the receivables we have with our intercompany operations with Valid Spain. So some accounting factors may come into it, but I'm just saying that because this is not our operational reality. But we still have a positive expectation of having a good net income this year. And just as we did in 2021, we intend to pay the minimum mandatory dividends out because we prefer to reinvest this in our company so that we can have better returns than shareholders would have simply by receiving some dividends. So we can't foresee right now how much it will be, but we hope to continue paying the mandatory minimum so that we can reinvest more in the company. Great. And as the last question, since we started the day with a communication on Vsoft, I'll finish with a question related to Valid Ventures. Guilherme asks if we have an expected committed capital for 2022, but I'm sure that we can also talk about the future. Thank you, Guilherme. Instead of talking about committed capital, that is sort of an incentive for spending. I don't know if I like to think about values like that, but in our philosophy, what we're seeking is maybe one or two additional companies until the end of the year. If we see other good opportunities, I don't see why not, since we have the cash to invest. But we're seeking one or two companies that can work well for us, and that should be our future philosophy. It's less about how much you want to spend. We don't want to incentivize spending, but we want to have a couple of good companies every year. I think that's a good KPI to keep in mind. Great, everyone. So once again, on behalf of everyone present, thank you for watching. Thank you for sending us your questions. Our investor relations channel is available through this QR code. So if you'd like to schedule a session with our executives, we have our agendas blocked tomorrow or for the rest of the week, but it was a pleasure to have you, and we'll see you soon. Have a great afternoon.